like-hearted queens all around the world. So if you're interested in joining or learning more, doors are open right now for Rose Gold Goddesses. Head over to rosegoldgoddesses.com. That's Rose Gold Goddesses, plural. You can also find that link in the show notes. As soon as you join, you walk through the 5 pillars of Rose Gold Goddesses, dive deep into your divine feminine embodiment, and then have hundreds of workshops available for you. Plus, you'll receive our calendar to join me live in our next monthly Goddess Circle.
And the Wild Bunch performed
I'm so excited to have you there. Again, head over to rosegoldgoddesses.com and you can find that link in the show notes.
And later still,
even doing headstands and handstands when you're on your period is not allowing that flow. But even doing core work, because we're not trying to tense up our core when we're bleeding, but we're trying to loosen and soften. So, in Ayurveda they say just walk, and stretch, but not really upside down things. And I think it's important that we shift things with our menstrual cycle, which could be a whole other podcast. And I also want to talk about, I really love breathwork, and I've tried different breathworks. And, I know Dr. Joe Dispenza and a lot of people really resonate, but every time I've done the breathwork, it's very similar. It's an inhale, it holds on the inhale. And I try, and it just, it never really, my body really rejects it, actually. And for me, that's why I like Wim Hof breathwork, which is interesting because it's another man. So, because before I was like, maybe men's energy systems, because they're, more ascension-oriented, and like maybe they just do better with the inhale holds. But Wim Hof is also very masculine, teaching philosophy, man, I don't even know what it's called, but it's on the exhale. So you're doing that powerful breath, but it's through the mouth. Wim Hof breath is through the mouth. And so you're doing that, but it's quite slow.
And now the group
so you're like,
Japan. Another step on the ladder to wider success.
Me and Nelly went out there the following year.
And most people end up moving. Like I'm kind of like waving my body forward and back, almost like a Sufi grind, but in a forward and back rocking motion.
Yeah, it's an undulation.
It's an undulation, and it really is coming from my core, and the rest of my body's following. And then I inhale in, I hold the inhale for a bit, but the long hold is on the exhale, and that's, I feel myself melt, my shoulder tension melt, myself soften, and I can go for so long without breathing. It amazes me when I use the timer, and I try not to use the timer because that could take me back into the how long was my breath hold,
Let's compete. Let's
exactly. Track it. But just letting myself, just unwind, and it's the same with sexual energy. Like in Tantra, they say, instead of what most of us do when we're going to orgasm, we tense, we hold our breath, we hold our shoulders to have a tipping point. And it's like, imagine you have a little teacup and you're filling that teacup with water. Well, it doesn't take much water for the teacup to overflow, and you have a little orgasm, petit mort, as the French say, the little death. But let's say you want to expand, then you're going to have a little short clitoral peak orgasm that might last you 3 seconds tops. And that's what most people experience for their entire lives. Well, let's talk about some more feminine form movements that we can put into Kundalini, and then there's a breath thing that I think we should try. So, right away, the undulation. If we think about how, this is how snakes move, this is how sperm moves, DNA is a spiral. Like, we just see spirals and undulations everywhere in nature. So it's really funny because I went to White Tantric, which is like the ultimate Kundalini thing you can do, where you go and you're like 140 other people, and they put you in these grids, and you have to wear a turban, and you have to wear white. It's like rules. And we were working with a partner doing these very intense kriyas and looking into each other's eyes. You guys were like in the river, right? In the freezing cold river doing that. I did it in a church, but I'm sure you could do it in a river. But it's very structured. So even the partners, the groups of partners, were on a particular grid, and you're supposed to keep up and not let your partner down. And I had a lot of energy, and I was able to do some very hard things, like hard arm holds, where my arms were up for 30 minutes. But the way I was able to do it is I was moving just a little bit the whole time, And when there was a lunch break, I was talking to some other people at the event, and I was saying, I'm so proud of myself. I did that 30-minute hold. I was able, I was just doing this slight movement, and this guy was like, that's cheating. I kid you not. He was like, that's cheating. You need to be completely still. That is a coping mechanism, blah, blah, blah. And that stayed with me, Sahar, for years. Lo and behold, I was actually of course it was. It was like it was a man kundalini teacher, so I took what he said seriously because he was a teacher as well. And lo and behold, like 6 years later, I'm like, I was doing feminine form kundalini. I wasn't doing the pressure, tension, stretching, friction down to make something force up. I was playing something big. I was titrating. I was able to stay in this like really challenging posture.
One of the things that made massive attacking,
coaxing the kundalini to come out and play with me. So when I teach a more feminine form kundalini class, which is basically all the classes on YouTube at this point, I'm inviting in, moving as nature. So undulations and spirals is something you want to invite in.
I think he was daydreaming.
Touch as something you want to invite in. Like, do Sufi grind in a butterfly hug. Do Sufi grind with your hands stroking your face. Get your hands in your hair, right? Like, all of these things make it feel so sensual. And we have all these nerve endings in our hands, which of course you can use for structured mantra, mudra practice, like great idea. But also, if we just like add the element of touch to even something like a spinal flex, like the spinal flex I teach now, I have us stroke our thighs as we inhale and come forward, and stroke from knee to pelvis as you come back. There's so many different ways we can play with touch. You can touch with your whole hand. You can touch with one finger. You can touch with a fingernail. You can just trace your lips. You can do like a tickly touch. You can. Some Kundalini Kriyas have you actually pound the body like this, but just inviting in touch, inviting in undulation, inviting in spirals, inviting in rocking. Rocking is so soothing. And I think that's what I was kind of self-soothing in a lot of these movements, and still getting that energy, flowing and this is a big reframe that we haven't even talked about yet, but it's like the show and the point of all of this isn't the explosion out the crown of the head, unless we're preparing for the next life and wanting to disassociate and leave our bodies, which like we don't if we're in this community. The thing we're trying to get to is the love story within us of this Shakti energy and the Shiva energy making love in our heart center. And if we look at the heart chakra, we see that yantra of the Star of David, which is representing these two energies, the current of liberation and the current of manifestation, in union in the heart. And when we think of the Kundalini awakening at the heart, it makes so much more sense that this is an orbit and that we need to focus on grounding practices. And you asked a little bit about the history of like why are these energy, like these practices so focused on ascending energy?
He looked at music.
And this is something I've heard. I don't know. I wasn't there. But when Yogi Bhajan first came to the U.S., a lot of the people he was working with were people coming off of drugs in the 60s and the 70s. And so if someone's coming off of heroin and I need to teach them yoga, I'm going to do something that's incredibly intense
makes them feel high.
and make them feel high. And it's interesting because, again, this is just me, but as I look at his kriyas moving forward, and I don't really teach Yogi Bhajan kriyas anymore after the whole show of what happened there, but back when I was studying his work more deeply, I noticed that even the kriyas he was teaching towards the end of his life, like if you, in the 90s, were more grounding. Because at that point he was teaching a more like general population. So I always say, if you are working with the Kundalini Research Institute, which is his company, KRI, Yogi Bhajan System, look at the date of the kriya that you're looking at in the book. Because not always, but a lot of times those ones that are more in like the late 80s, 90s aren't as intensely energizing as the ones from the 60s and 70s.
Well, I noticed that most people who are very drawn to that traditional Kundalini yoga had dealt with addictions. Yes. Whether they were friends of mine or influencers or people that so I noticed that trend. So it's interesting to now know that, he actually did create those kriyas for that because and that's what they kept talking about, it makes you feel high. And some people maybe are more biologically wired to have, some people are much more into psychedelics and experiences that they want to feel high. Some people are a lot more kapha that they don't want to feel that. But what I find is we often our
gravitative thing that we have too much of already, you know? So it's like that person who's already like hyper militaristic, perfectionist, pushes themselves, goes to all the intense exercise classes and hits and this and that, and then they want to feel high on the kundalini. It's like it's so much pitta, it's so much fire energy, it's a combustion. Maybe that person who's very kapha, they take it slow. At the yoga class, they opt out of everything. They go into shavasana early. They could actually really benefit from this practice.
Yes. I talk about this in my book too, which quotes your book on Ayurveda, because it's all about cultivate the opposite, right? We learn that from Ayurveda, and we see that in yoga as well. Usually, the yoga style that you're attracted to initially is not the one that you need to find balance. Like, I am the perfect example of this. As someone with high pitta, like I was attracted to hot yoga initially. Of course, it felt natural to push myself that hard, but it wasn't serving me. It wasn't bringing me into balance. And after those classes, I would feel so depleted. It's like, yeah, I'd ace the hot yoga class, and then I'd spend the rest of the day on the couch because I was exhausted. So I see the same thing, like the people coming into our Kundalini teacher training. It's like they're